I think one principle that's often used is to go by the so for example, in Mahmoud Sabit's collection, it's actually composed of multiple collections that come from different people. So his grandmother, and she inherited collections from her father, for example, and from her mother. So we go by there's perhaps like 6 different collections within the Mahmoud Sabit collection. Each of those could be broken down more, but we go with the last person to pass on their material to Mahmoud Sabit. Within that, I mean, this is one of the things then there's a numbering system. So we use a 3 letters to designate the collection within which it comes from, and then a numbering system, which is not, I mean, it's quite loose. It doesn't have anything to do with photographic process and the thing that in terms of then what the next thing you need to actually make that to be able to interact with all of that, to retrieve photographs, etc., is you need a software that has so you digitize the image, for example, and you have metadata next to it, and you can do a search. So you can search for images, this kind of process, this date, these people are in it, etc. It just gives you greater flexibility in terms of looking for things. Or you can search by index number or whatever. So I mean that's one approach. But I think generally a lot of collections begin with the they can try and keep track of how this material came into the collection in the first place. That's a basic organizing principle, so that doesn't get dispersed. Yeah. So, you want to answer anything?
If I can just add something to this. You don't really have anyone in Egypt who's collections manager. You can go in and say, okay, let's do a reading of this body of work and try and decipher or create category tags. For example, how to interpret, how do you write what you see, what this material is. So there's a number of ways. Formal museums work with acquisition numbers. So it's important for them to know what date this artifact entered their collection. So it has nothing to do really with the content or the making of the piece. It's about acquisition. In some places, it's really about content. So we have something to do with the image itself. With other places, it's about the photographer, the body of work of this one individual person who created all of this stuff that you might find in many different locations, and trying to have something consistent that would be an identifier for it. For example, in my when I'm collecting bodies of work, I have about 40 different criteria. It took me a while to get there. Trial and error. I have about 40 different identifiers that are attached to each piece. And that way you can look for it either by a serial number or by something within the content or something within the technique or size or the author or people within a number of different things. So and there's no rule. Globally, there's no rule. So every institution or focal point, people who are intaking this stuff will make up their own rules depending on different logic.
Yes, but also to have 40 identifiers, then digitizing is important.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about this more too, the whole idea of digitizing and how much loss there is when you go through that process. So having these markers really tries to save the context, which this thing, because what you're doing is you're taking a 3-dimensional artifact and you're creating a 2-dimensional image from it. So you lose a lot of information, materiality of the piece, and then all these other tangential issues. So the more identifiers you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that digitization in Egypt is a really tricky thing because often people digitize collections and then they think, then it's as if the original photographs aren't as important anymore, and the originals tend to disappear, which is of course exactly not what you don't want to happen. But at the same time, digitizing photographs can be really useful in terms of creating a database of what you have and easy access, and then you can compare things, and I mean, that's really key. So I think just the key point that, you can't, the digital print never, or digital file on a computer never substitutes for the original, which unfortunately seems to be lost on a lot of the archives.
Digitization is a new practice.
Yeah.
Now that we're all computer savvy, etc., it's a new thing. So there's a lot of dialogue and debates about what are the rules.
And it's not as easily done as you might think. I mean, something as basic as having the right resolution can sometimes, in the Ahram archive they have a lot of photographs digitized, but they're usually low res, so it's, in terms of looking at them, it's really frustrating. Or at the Arab Image Foundation, I was really surprised to go in and, I asked to look at their photographs, and they were kind of like, well, do you want to look? Are you sure you want to look at the originals? I mean, the idea of the original, yes, I want to look at the original is really important. And even at the Arab Image Foundation, that was still seemed to be an issue. I mean, you have to, I think anyone who has a collection has to decide how much access they give people. So of course, you don't want people to handle the photographs too much. At the same time, you have to balance that with the importance of doing that. So it's a complicated issue. Yeah.
I have small point. When you was talking about the sources of images and archives, there was things I think we are not interested in, but it's the old bookstores in Egypt. When I go to the book fair, Cairo book fair, I found really rare photos in the hands of it's not, there is no interest in archiving this. I think I found in the place where there is old books, there is old French magazine where there is it's all photos from Egypt in maybe 1940s, and I didn't find, I don't think that it's in another archive, and there is no interest in archiving this. So I don't know if there is a person, a researcher, a university that can give maybe money, and I'm sorry, digitizing is important even to save the information, even it's not enough important to save everything, but if we are digitizing, we are saving something, we are archiving something. So maybe no one can make a project to own all these collections, which are in a corners of Egypt. It's there, but maybe and it happens. Rich people come and buy it, and then it disappears. Maybe go to another country, and maybe not be available for researcher or available for anyone. So I don't know if there is any collector interested in or not collector, sorry, institution or university or researcher interested in documenting these magazines or photos. And it wasn't clear. I'm sorry about it's. I think we are facing problems to access to the history of the photography in Egypt. That's in general what you said, but it was supposed from I think you to talk about the environmental issues. And what about if I want to see the collection of the Cairo University, or what's about the National Archive? I know there's great problems, but is there discussions now about changing this? The idea is even it's governmental institution. It's open to the people to see their history in the National Archive. I don't know if there is movement in this issue. So there's two questions. I'm sorry for talking too much, but Is there is for, especially for you as researchers, is there an interest or focus, or it's lost, as many things lost, to archiving the images which is inside books and magazines, which is in the old bookstores, and even there is images, and the other side is the accessibility to the institutions, which I'm not talking about private collections, governmental collections, the National Archive and the universities. Is it now, for you as a researcher, you find it more easier, or for the normal people, is it more easier now to enter to the National Archive?
I was wondering, collections, public collections or private collections, it's the same for access. It's very hard to get access because they have a great fear for stealing, for publishing their collections, their photographs. So, and the other reason because there are, as Farid said, there are no specialists, there are no collection managers or conservators specialized in the conservation of photographs. So the collectors and the persons who are responsible for the collections in the public collections, in the university or in the archive, public archive, the national archive or the press like Al-Akhbar, Al-Aam, they will not give you the access easily.
I mean, one thing I put this list of websites, but I totally forgot to add. I did a survey of archives in Egypt. They're not all photographic archives, but some of them are, and they discuss access policies, hours of operation, I think they have. I think there needs to be more surveys of what's out there, but of course it's difficult because people don't want to give information that easily. Also, a lot of archives, don't have an index of what they have, so you have to go through the whole archive to know what they have. There are problems in creating surveys of archives in Egypt, but I think it should be done. But I think also, I think that there's a lot of material out there, obviously, and you like every day you hear a different horror story about how this, was, destroyed and that box was thrown away and etc. But I mean that's why I think everybody it's an important issue, but it's a really big issue, and it has to do with systemic issues. It has to do with how the government sees its role in relationship to people and their access to information and their access to history. It has to do with the kind of skills that are available here. It has to do with the training, which Ibrahim spoke about. It has to do with so many things. It has to do with the way that historic photographs have been largely circulated via markets. So there's a market here, so people buy photographs. That tends to create a situation where the researcher who's not interested in buying photographs is kind of seen as viewed as suspicious somehow, because photographs equal money or they equal information, which might be dangerous. How do you start to tackle that is the question, I think. And I think it has to be done on an archive by archive basis. There's no way of just changing everything at once, and that's, I think, because these problems are so deeply ingrained, and so, maybe you have to have a revolution, another revolution, that would really address this kind of thing. But, the public archives are not any friendlier to researchers at all. And also sometimes there's misunderstandings. People have a lot of stuff in a public archive, a lot of photographic prints, but they don't think of it as important cultural heritage or as photographic material. It's just that, that box of photographs has been sitting over there forever, and they don't really, so if you go in and ask them, can I look at your archive of photos, they say, oh, we don't have any archive, but they have this box of photographs. You know?